Okay, so the first case study that we're going to look at for overpopulation is the Sahel, and specifically we're going to be taking a look at the country of Sudan. So you can see the Sahel runs through quite a significant proportion of Sudan. So there's about 138 million people in the entire Sahel region. Okay, so high population, but the main problem is a lack of resources. And the main resources that they're lacking in is food, is shelter, is land, is fuel, is water. And this population is expected to grow rapidly and increase by another, I think, it's supposed to double over the next 40 years. So if that happens, there's going to be huge problems of overpopulation. Right, so currently in the Sahel, it's a population of 138 million, expected to double in the next 40 years. The main reason for overpopulation, so remember when we're talking about these case studies, we have to look at the causes, the effects and solutions. The main reason or the main cause of overpopulation in the Sahel is rapid population growth. So if you look at this figure here, okay, in 40 years, they expect there to be over 270 million people in this stretch of land. Absolutely massive. This is because the population is growing very rapidly. The main driver of that are high birth rates. This is putting pressure on food and water and other resources then. The other causes of rapid population growth are immigration and the fact that the death rate is falling, but the main driver is high birth rates. That's what we're going to focus on mostly. So the birth rate of Sudan is 39 per thousand. And the death rate is about 10 per thousand. So this puts them at about stage 2 of the demographic transition model. So if you remember the demographic transition model, stage 2 had very rapid natural increase. So very quick growth of total population. The main reasons why there is high birth rates is number 1, economic poverty. So we talked about this a lot, so I'm just going to fly through this. So basically the people in Sudan, in the Sahel, they rely on their children to support them into old age, therefore they have more kids. Also because it's a farming agricultural type of society, there's an economic need to have children. So they're seen as an economic asset, they contribute to the household and they help around the house and they work on the farms. Also because infant mortality rates are quite high. So the infant mortality rate in Sudan was 58 in 2017, and this compares to 3.5 in Ireland. So huge deaths of children under the age of 4. So 58 means that for every 1,000 kids born, 58 of them die. And because of this, families have more kids. All right, so economic poverty leads to higher birth rates because children are seen as an economic asset, because children support their families into old age. There'll be a lack of family planning, and also to make up for infant mortality rates. Secondly then, status of women in society. So few girls in this region would remain in school beyond their teenage years. 52% of girls here are married by the time they're 18. Okay, so over half of the population of teenage girls are married by the time they're 18. And this is part of their culture, and it's associated with the traditional roles of motherhood. And they would have very high fertility rates of over 5 children per woman, and a lack of access to birth control. So both of these things lead to high birth rates, which then causes rapid population growth, which is means that there's too many people for the resources, which leads to overpopulation. Okay, so Sudan would be here, birth rate 39, death rate 10. Stage 2, the demographic transition model, and if you just focus on the population growth there, you'll see rapid population growth, and this is all natural increase. Okay, I talked about that. Oh, there we go, circle. Right, a couple of other things that are causing rapid population growth are immigration and falling death rate. Now, they don't have the same effect as high birth rates, but they are still significant. A lot of the countries around the Sahel are experiencing civil war and famine, and as a result there's been an increase in the number of refugees coming into the Sahel. So 1 million people fled from Ethiopia to Sudan to escape from famine and war, and these tend to be the poorest people. So if you've poorer people coming into really poor regions, that's going to put even more pressure on resources. The death rate is falling in recent years. So again, if they're at stage 2 of the demographic transition model, you can see the death rate here, which is dropping dramatically. And the reason for this is better healthcare. So vaccines have been introduced for measles and whooping cough, and this has drastically reduced child mortality rates. Also, there's been an increase in education and knowledge about how to live healthier lives. So you'll see here they're using solar cookers to boil water, so that they have clean water, and also to sterilise feeding equipment for babies. So the first cause, rapid population growth, as a result of mostly high birth rates, but also as a result of immigration and falling death rates. The second cause then of overpopulation is resource depletion. So look, the Sahel is getting hammered out of it on both ends. Population is increasing, while at the same time resources are decreasing. So this is the perfect storm for overpopulation to occur. The main cause of resource depletion is poor farming practices. And we did this in geoecology. So the poor farming practices we're talking about are overgrazing, so too many cattle grazing the land, destroying the land, removing the grass, stripping the bark off trees, soil erosion, etc., etc. Wells are built, and if wells are built, then this has the effect of using up groundwater, etc. The other issue is overcultivation, so too many crops are being grown, the land does not get a chance to recover. They're being used for maybe cash crops, so cotton and beans. The soil is stripped of its nutrients, becomes infertile, and eventually ends up being useless and getting blown away. Another problem then is deforestation, so cutting down the trees. The wood is used for fuel, it's also used for building shelters, and it's used for making charcoal as well. So cutting down the trees, leaves the soil exposed. So you see the heat of the sun here will completely bake it out until it's useless. Will also leave the soil exposed to flash flooding. So if there's downpours or torrential downpours, you'll see that we've got some gully erosion here. So I know that was very quick, but basically because of poor farming practices, because of overgrazing, overcultivation combined with deforestation, then this destroys the soil. If the soil is destroyed, they can no longer grow crops for themselves. Another massive issue here has been climate change, and this is also leading to overpopulation. So if you have a look at southern Sudan, basically the trend from the 1900s, okay, if you have a look at temperature first, so the red line here, so have a look at it from, I'd say this is back in 1980s, okay, a massive increase. So the trend over time has been an increase in temperature, all right, and at the same time the trend over time has been a significant decrease in rainfall. So rainfall amounts in the last 20 years have decreased by 30%, absolutely massive, and 95% of the land farmed in the Sahel is rain fed. So that means they rely on rainwater, not irrigation, not rivers, they rely on rainwater. So there's longer, drier seasons. Shortage of water basically means they can't produce enough food. They can't produce enough food through climate change. The soil is being destroyed. They have more people being born, so therefore there's going to be shortages. And this is just an example here of the type of rainfall that they get. And when the rainy season does happen, it's not like Ireland where we just get steady rain constantly. They have a rainy season which brings absolutely torrential, heavy downpours, and instead of being beneficial, because the soil is now so dry and so baked it can't absorb the water, so instead all of the water runs off the surface, it takes the top layer, and it can cause gully erosion to occur. Right, so they are the causes. Causes are, we'll come back to it in a minute. Right, what are the effects? The main effect then is desertification. So the spread of the desert. And the spread of the Sahara Desert means that, well, obviously if there's desert you can't grow food. And desertification is happening at a rate of about 10 kilometres per year. And this has led to a huge amount of food shortages and famine. And the situation again is being made worse by climate change. Right, you're going to watch this video.
Where Senegal and Mauritania meet has long been a place where grains grew and cattle grazed. But now the people who live here say food is becoming harder and harder to come by. The reason is the advancing desert. Umar Samba Khan is one of the leaders of his village. He delivers a bag of grains from a neighboring village to add to his village's nearly empty pantry.
In years in the past, we had enough food in here to last a year, and the surplus we would sell to make money. Now we do not even have enough for ourselves.
Rivers once used for fishing and watering cattle are drying up. Patches of green land are few and far between. Cows are a staple food in the area, but now herders must drive their cattle for days to find land they can graze. Crops have also suffered. And for the most part, it is only older farmers like Musa Aliuso who stay behind to try to till this soil.
I am 67 years old. All I know is agriculture. There is nothing else I can do.
He says his hands are tired of working land, which is producing less and less.
Imagine trying to grow crops on that.
There used to be rice in these fields just a few years ago. Scientists blame not only global warming, but also farming practices, such as clearing trees, overplanting crops, and diverting of waterways for irrigation for the desert's advance. The residents say, with the food crisis in the region, halting farming is not an option. Carrie Barber for VOA News, Podor, Senegal.
Okay, so Senegal is another country in the Sahel, and I'll also show you this clip here.
In Niger, they're digging up the riverbed to get the last drops of water as another drought grips the Sahel region of West Africa.
Drought due to climate change.
Usually at this time of year, there is a river here, but the droughts are coming with increased frequency, and the people have still not recovered from the effects of the last one. In countries such as Niger, Chad, and Mauritania, grain production is down by as much as a third. Millet and sorghum are in short supply, and in the markets, prices are high. Food may be in short supply, but there is plenty of desperation. This woman says she'll leave her home to make money by selling sand in the capital, Niamey. People across the region are leaving their homes and farms, literally in search of greener pastures.
Okay, so out-migration.
In Mali, many people have already left their homes looking for food. Sheikh Neba can get as many as 8 tons of cereal from his land. This year, he got nothing. WFP has managed to purchase food in advance of the coming lean season. For the Sahel, it has already brought more than 30,000 metric tons in this way, enough to feed 2 million people for a month. Nowadays, the World Food Programme aims to provide food assistance with maximum impact on the nutrition of those who need it most. In an emergency like the one facing the Sahel today, WFP aims to deliver the right food at the right time, in time to save lives.
Okay, so what you can see there is a region that's in severe need of food because they can't grow their own. So all of the factors that we talked about mean that less food can be produced from the soil. So the main effect of this is food shortages and famine. So if you can just have a look at your booklet on page 65, and I'll read through this with you. So remember, we're talking about the effects. Okay, so at top of page 65, all of the above factors mean that less food can be produced from the soil. Therefore, overpopulation has resulted in food shortages and famine. The situation has been made worse by the periods of drought since the 1960s, which have further reduced soil fertility and food production, but have also put pressure on water resources. Famine was officially declared in 2011, but the reality was that months before this, cattle and goats were dying, food was scarce, and children were losing weight. Immunity to disease was declining, and children tend to be the first victims. So basically, if people aren't getting the proper nutrition or food, then they are less immune to disease, and children are the first to suffer here. The summer of 2012 brought one of the most severe droughts ever experienced in the region. Cereal harvest fell by 25%, and over 15 million people faced starvation. So hunger officially becomes famine. So it has to be, governments have to kind of, what am I trying to say here? Famine is an official thing. Do you know what I mean? So when 20% of households in a region face extreme food shortages, when more than 30% of the population are affected by serious malnutrition, and when the daily death rate exceeds 2 for every 10,000 people. So in those three circumstances, then a famine is officially declared. But the point that I'm making here is that even up until that point, even to get to that point, huge amounts of people would have had to die and suffer, and there wouldn't have been enough resources. The other resource that's been affected is water. So water resources are also being affected as less rainfall leads to a decreasing water table. More frequent droughts and increased water usage for cattle means that people are forced to drink from contaminated water resources or walk long distances to get drinking water. Lake Chad has shrunk to 5% of its original size in 40 years, and this was an important source of fresh water for many countries in the Sahel and also for irrigation. The shrinking of the lake has led to crop failures, death of livestock, and increased poverty. A lack of resources, and those resources being food and water, has forced millions of people to leave the Sahel's rural regions. So the next effect of overpopulation is outmigration, and this was responsible for 5 million people leaving in 1995. Most migrants move to urban centres. This then results in the rapid growth of cities in the Sahel. So Bamako, the capital of Mali, increased in size from 160,000 in 1960 to 1.3 million in 2016. And this is because so many people are coming from the poor, ravaged countrysides. As these poor migrants arrive in huge numbers, they settle in shanty towns on the outskirts. And here there's unsafe housing and unsanitary living conditions. In some instances, the in-migration has resulted in tension and violence between the migrants and the native population. So Sudan and South Sudan are an example of this. The main cause of conflict here is cultural difference. This has resulted in civil war in Sudan, where religious tensions resulted from the migration of the Arabic cattle herders further south into the land farmed by black Christians. Competition for land and water contributed to the outbreaks of two civil wars. Alright, can this be fixed? So again, page 65, what are the solutions to overpopulation in the Sahel region? Can't be fixed overnight, but there are definitely things that can be put in place. A lot of this links in with what we did in geoecology and soil conservation as well. So there's a lot of the SRPs you can use there. So the first thing that can be done is sustainable farming practices, and this is down the bottom quarter of page 65. So in order to make the area sustainable again, desertification needs to be halted or stopped. This can be done by using the following methods. Planting trees to replace the ones that are cut down. This is known as afforestation. Trees protect the soil from being blown away and they help bind it together. A shelter belt can be used, and we did this in geoecology. This is a line of vegetation that protects the soil from the wind blowing it away. Afforestation could also allow for the sustainable use of trees for firewood and shelter. Keyword there being sustainable. They should use crop rotation, so rotating where crops are planted and giving the soil a break, and that means that the soil won't lose all of its nutrition. Over to page 66, they could introduce drought-resistant grasses, so a type of genetically modified grass that can survive longer periods of drought. They actually think that they might have to introduce those into Ireland in the coming years, which is kind of scary. Because overall our summer and spring temperatures have been increasing and our own grass isn't surviving very well. Anyway, use of zai pits, and again we talked about these in geoecology. At the start of the rainy season, seeds are planted into holes filled with compost and manure. This concentration of nutrients and water around the seed leads to increased output. Then the Great Green Wall. This is a project involving 11 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Trees and plants will be grown along an 8,000 kilometre stretch, and the aims of this are to increase food production, reduce climate change, and to prevent outmigration. And then the use of solar ovens. So they were the ones I showed you earlier. By reducing the demand for firewood, so stopping cutting down trees, they use the sun power instead. Simple, low-cost solar ovens reduce the rate of deforestation. So they're possible solutions to farming practices and deforestation. Education of women, and again we looked at this when we did population density and distribution. So if women are allowed, and particularly, do you remember the girl effect? If women are allowed to stay in education, they're less likely to marry younger, they're more knowledgeable about children's healthcare and family planning, and more likely to have fewer but more healthy children. And you can develop on those points using what we talked about earlier. Alright, what time are we on? Okay, 20 minutes, not too bad. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to summarise all of that. Okay, so the case study is the Sahel, and the country we've chosen to look at is Sudan. And remember, we're talking about overpopulation. So the main causes are rapid, so very quick population growth. Okay, and they're at stage 2 demographic transition model. All right, why is there rapid population growth? Mostly because of high birth rates. And there's high birth rates because of poverty. Why is my P gone? Sorry. Poverty and status of women. Alright, and you should be able to discuss those. So so they're economically developing. Economically less developed or developing. Alright, that is the main reason. Other less important reasons would include in-migration. I'd even forget about that, to be honest with you. And falling death rates. And the falling death rates are because of better healthcare, e.g. vaccinations. Okay, so basically all of these things here mean that loads more people in the region. Okay, so that's the cause. Now, do you want to take that down? Not sure. Next thing then is the effect. So let's get rid of those. Erase all ink. What's happening? Sorry, just go back to another white screen there. Okay. The next thing then are, after the causes, are what are the effects? So effects in the Sahel. Oh, sorry, no. Our second cause, cause 2, equals resource depletion. Okay. So overcropping, overgrazing. What even is that letter? I don't know. Deforestation, climate change. All of these mean that the soil destroyed, less water available, that's mostly climate change. Can't grow crops. They can't grow crops. Starvation and famine. If they can't live there, out migration. Okay. So resource depletion leads to all of those. Sorry, I just jumped the gun there a little bit. So what resources are being depleted? So the resources being depleted are soil and water and wood. Okay. So causes, resource depletion and population growth. Right. Effects. I kind of did that in the last one. Starvation and famine. Japers. Out migration. Okay, then the out migration has led to what did we want to say? Cities rapid growth, so rural rapid growth of cities. Growth of population in cities because that's where they're all going. It's also led to civil wars because you've got the movement of different cultural groups. Right, like when I sit back and look at this, it looks like a chicken has dipped its feet in red paint and just kind of scratched the screen. So apologies, but I hope you can follow this. Finally then, how do we fix it? Can't fix it overnight. Too far gone. Solutions. Okay, so we need to conserve the soil. We need to plant trees. We need to educate women. And conserving the soil, side pits, shelter belts, okay. We've got the green wall. New varieties of grass, etc. Alright, so that is overpopulation in the Sahel. You need to read through that, quite a lot of that, in your booklets from page 62 to 66.